Hello everyone, Nick the DM here with a new monster. Well, an old monster technically, but new for those of you who've only seen creatures in 5th edition. Today I will introduce you to the Nishruu. What is the Nishruu? Well, before I tell you that, let me describe a scenario to you. This might be familiar to some of you. You're DMing a campaign or a one-shot, and you want to design an encounter for your players. You want to make it challenging and fun for them. You scour the books, the Monster Manual, Volo's Guide, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. After all your research, you finally find the perfect monster. Versatile, strong, and with some immunities to make your party struggle just enough. Finally, the time has come. The encounter is all set. You check the stat block one last time and freeze as you realize something. You read the dreaded phrase. Immune to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks. I am always so disappointed when I see that. In a low magic campaign, it's very effective, but in a normal or high magic, not so much, especially in later levels. Now, you could always change the stat block to make it immune to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, period, but sometimes this feels just a little unfair to do to the party. You could also add an anti-magic circle, but you'd either need a spellcaster nearby, which is pretty easy for them to take out, or you make the entire area naturally anti-magic, and that would make combat boring for the casters because they're not able to do anything. But worry not, fellow dungeon masters. I have the solution to making combat challenging and interesting. I present to you the Nishruu. To quote from the 3.5 Monsters of Faerun, weird, misty creatures from another plane, Nishroos eat magic, wreaking havoc with spellcasters and magic items. A Nishruu appears as a red, misty shape approximately a sphere 12 feet in diameter. It glows, pulsing regularly as it drifts about, searching for the magical energy that sustains it. Nishroos may have their own alien language, but all attempts to communicate with them have failed. End quote. Nishruu are literally living clouds of anti-magic. They are such cool and weird creatures, but even more so is how unique they are in combat. Quote, Nishroos do not use physical attacks, and they disregard physical attacks made on them, though these attacks bypass the creature's immunity if they are magic weapons. They move fearlessly and relentlessly towards sources of magic. Characters and creatures can stand within the form of a Nishruu without harm, except for spellcasters, as noted below. End quote. Now, moving on to their stat block, most of these abilities are identical to their 3.5 abilities with a few minor tweaks to account for the change in addition. Nishruu, large aberration, chaotic neutral, armor class of 9, they're easy to hit points 76 or 9d10 plus 27, they have a fly speed of 20 feet and the ability to hover. Their ability scores are their strength is a 1, very low, they're a misty ball of cloud, so next, dexterity is a 10, constitution is a 16, intelligence is a 13, wisdom is a 15, and charisma is a 13. Saving throws, they have a proficiency in dexterity, constitution, and intelligence. Skills, they have arcana, perception, and stealth. Damage resistances, they have cold resistance and immunity to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. This, again, like I said, is normally very worrying, but because of their anti-magic abilities, which I will give you more details on soon, this won't be much of a problem. Condition immunities. They're immune to being blinded, charmed, exhausted, grappled, prone, or restrained. Senses. Passive perception of 15, and like listed earlier, they don't have any language that is known, so their language is listed as none. Challenge rating of 6, so they can either be on their own, which will be it'll be fairly hard for the party, just because they won't be able to do too much to it, but without any actual creatures there to deal damage, it's not too much of a challenge to fight. Its abilities. Gaseous form. The Nishruu can enter another creature's space, and other creatures can enter its space. The Nishruu can fit through spaces as narrow as 1 inch without squeezing. Charge magic. When a Nishruu is slain, its body dissipates and drifts away. Any magic item with charges that is in contact with it when it dies gains 1d6 additional charges. A magic weapon that strikes the killing blow against a Nishruu gains the spell storing ability for 1d6 days. Incredibly useful, especially if you have a caster on your team and your team likes to split up a lot, they can give it to the martial character. Vulnerabilities. This is not up by the resistances because they have specific vulnerabilities that involve items. A Rod of Absorption or Ring of Spell Turning brought into contact with the Nishruu has a 5% chance of destroying the creature immediately with no harm to the item, except that its color changes to a dusky red. If the item does not destroy the Nishruu, it is negated in the same manner as other magic items. Nishroos are also poisoned by salt. A handful of salt deals 2d10 points of damage to a Nishruu. Treat this as a ranged attack with a range of 5 feet and a long range of 10 feet. Incredibly interesting vulnerabilities. Salt, not things characters have on them often, but is still a very common item. So if you have a chef on your team, this might make it a lot easier of an encounter. With the Rod of Absorption and Ring of Spell Turning vulnerability, basically anytime they come into contact with a player who has one of those out in the open, not in a bag of holding, because that is a pocket dimension that won't count. But if they come in contact with it, roll a d20, nat 1, the Nishruu is destroyed. Easy enough. Now, this is the longest ability it has, and one of the most intricate is Absorb Magic. Nishroos feed on magic and absorb magic they touch, whether it takes the form of spells cast at the creature, magic items it envelops, or even spellcasters within its misty body. This unusual diet follows the following effects. A Nishruu absorbs damaging spells cast at it, permanently gaining hit points equal to the damage the spell would have dealt. The only exceptions are cold and fire spells, which deal damage. Reduce damage in the case of cold spells with their resistance. And then the spell dissipates after one round. So if it's a spell that stays for multiple rounds, then it would not last more than one round in the case of the Nishruu. A Nishruu absorbs non-damaging spells cast at it, gaining 1 hit point per spell level of the spell. Mind-controlling spells and illusions have no effect whatsoever, so it basically has almost like a type of True Sight through illusion spells. I didn't add it as True Sight because it doesn't technically have any vision. A Nishruu in contact with a magic item that with charges drains 1d4 charges from the item upon contact in every round thereafter. So if the party members are holding items with charges on them, if they don't use them right away, they're pretty much not going to get a chance to. A Nishruu in contact with a magic item without charges negates the power of the item as long as it remains in contact with it, and then for 1d4 rounds afterwards. So even if the party gets enveloped by the Nishruu and then it dips out, they might still lose their magic weapons for another 4 rounds afterwards, which is going to make it a lot harder considering the Nishruu is immune to basically almost any spell damage and any damage done by physical weapons that aren't magical. If a character enveloped within a Nishruu attempts to use a potion or scroll, the magic item does not take effect until 1d4 rounds after the character leaves the Nishruu's body. So delayed effects from any magical item that activates. Going to make that a lot harder to combat. Now, artifacts do not operate while in contact with a Nishruu and for 1 round thereafter. So even artifacts, some of the strongest items in the game, are completely null and void when inside of the Nishruu's body. And the last part of its ability, spellcasters lose 1 prepared spell determined randomly upon initial contact with a Nishruu. Each round the spellcaster remains in contact with the creature, they lose an additional randomly selected spell. This lasts until the next time the spellcaster prepares their spells. So it basically removes the spellcaster's spells in general. So even if they do manage to get out of the Nishruu's body, then if they've been in there for too long, they might have lost some of their most effective spells, especially in combat like this, like Fireball or any fire type spell. In 3.5, this last ability, if spellcasters were affected by this and lost one of their spells, they had a chance of being affected by Feeble Mind. I took that away because an 8th level spell, especially Feeble Mind, is incredibly dangerous in a properly balanced encounter, but a CR6 creature, I don't find that fair. Because if you don't know what Feeble Mind does, It reduces your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, I believe, to 1 for 30 days. That's if you fail, and you can only repeat the saving throw every 30 days. I don't find that fair for a CR6 encounter. Now, there's one more thing I need to mention before I end the video. There is a variant of the traditional Nishruu, the Hakeashar. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Do not quote me on that. The Hakeashar, coming from the Monsters Compendium Annual Volume 2, quote, a Hakeashar appears as a red, misty sphere. Relatives of the Nishruu, these weird, rare creatures are believed to be from another plane. Within the red mists comprising the body of the Hakeashar, there are hundreds of grasping hands, probing eyes, and gaping, hungry mouths. End quote. The only difference between them and the Nishruu is their ability to deal damage through their Swarm of Bites ability. Somewhat like the Cloud of Daggers spell, there is no attack roll or saving throw. Instead, any creature who enters the Hakeashar's space for the first time on a turn, not their turn, on a turn, or who starts its turn will be subject to 2d10 piercing damage from the bites. This means when the Hakeashar enters the creature's space, the creature takes damage, and during the start of that creature's turn, they will also take damage. Or any other turn that a creature would enter it. So even if a creature is thrown in, they're subject to it. Even if the creature walks in on their turn, they're subject to it. It can be a lot of damage if the party's not smart about it. The Nishruu and Hakeashar are both unable to actually attack or even use opportunity attacks, as when we looked at their stat block, they had no actions whatsoever. So they're pretty easy to escape from and don't deal much damage. This is why they need to be paired with other creatures, even ones without the vulnerability to, or even ones without immunity only to magical weapons, because all the party's magical weapons are going to be null and void if they even have contact with the Nishruu. So if they're not paying attention and they get swept over by it, their items are losing their effects. And again, they only have 20 feet of movement, so even when dashing, they only have 40, which is going to be hard to keep up with most of the party at that point if they're running away. Well, that's all I have for today. If you liked this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more content. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!